I'm Lewis. I have 2 kids. I live in the UK. I have an amazing wife and family, and I run 2 7-figure businesses, both online. And that was not how I started my career at all. So I've had a full 180 transition from working in the corporate world. I spent 7 or 8 years, I think, working in the medical device sector. So my job used to be going around operating rooms in hospitals around London and teaching doctors and nurses around how to use surgical devices, specific types of surgical devices that we used to sell in, like keyhole surgery. So like if you've ever heard of anyone that has keyhole surgery, we created the devices. And so I used to go in there and teach them. And so it was a complete shift when one day I decided to set up an online business, created an e-commerce business, and then kind of went after that digital nomad lifestyle. Why did I start this podcast? I mean, really, I wanted to show a behind the scenes look at what it's like really running online businesses. You know, I now run an e-learning business, an e-commerce business. And I just think having that raw, unfiltered, behind the scenes look is something that's really valuable to people who are potentially aspiring to run these kinds of businesses. And I just wanted to show what the real life of it looks like, but also wanted to talk about my journey, what I've learned so far, where I'm going, and what I want to achieve, the types of goals that I have for myself. Yeah, I think the defining moment was, I mean, I remember it vividly. It's hard to say. It didn't all happen at that point, but there's always a trigger point, isn't there, where something happens and you think that's the moment that it all changed. But it was when I was working in the medical device sales production world, and I met with a colleague one afternoon, and we went to the Ace Hotel in Shoreditch, just like this swanky kind of cool hipster hotel, and there's like a bar. And we were there just with our corporate laptops doing some work. And when we walked in, I remember seeing this group of cool looking entrepreneurs, right? They all had their MacBooks, they had their like coffees and flat whites and stuff. And I just thought, wow, they look like they're doing well, but very relaxed and just in here, you know, in an afternoon working from a cool hotel. And it made me think that there was me in my like corporate suit. And I remember the colleague who I was with turned to me and said, have you ever considered being in the startup world or being an entrepreneur? I'd always seen you as the kind of person that would. And remember, at this point, I'm 7 years into my corporate journey. I'm like down that path at that point. And the answer was that I hadn't really. But then when I thought back to my past and like school, I was always in like money-making ventures. I was always trying to kind of start side businesses. And I think that it made me realize my dad had always been an entrepreneur. He created his own company. And there was this entrepreneurial fire inside me that I think was desperate to get out, but I just never knew where to channel it. And so I'd done a bit of like intrapreneurship, as they call it, where you're within a company and you become an entrepreneur, but I'd never created anything for myself. And that very evening, after watching those cool entrepreneur bros in that coffee shop in the hotel lobby, I went home and I was in bed and I was on Audible and I was just going off to bed, and I thought I'll download something because I had a long train journey for like 2 hours the next morning, and I searched the word, I think it was like entrepreneurship or how to start a business, and up popped the first book, which was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Now, when I say that, it sounds really cliche now because everyone who's an entrepreneur or who runs an online business, like many of them started with that book. But it honestly was, for me, that was the moment. And I was reading it, and like Tim Ferriss, the way he writes that book, it just sounds so obvious when you read it. You're like, of course, why would I build a lifestyle that works around my company and my business and only enjoy my time in the evenings and the weekends? Why am I not creating, like, lifestyle design? Why not create a business that works around the lifestyle that I want? And the lifestyle comes first. And so that's where the rabbit hole began for me. And I went down that path and I hired a coach and joined a program and started learning about entrepreneurship and e-commerce. And I made so many horrible mistakes. But yeah, that was the defining moment. It was listening to the 4-Hour Workweek over the next few days and then reading that book in time to come. That was the really exciting bit that I just couldn't put it down at that point. I was absorbing it and I was like, oh my God, my path is about to change here. And I could tell that this is what I was going to do, create an e-commerce business, move to Thailand. Like I'd kind of set these goals subconsciously in stone, but I had no idea what was about to unfold. And the next 7 years in entrepreneurship have just seemed to fly by, since I first started that first online business. So I've learned a lot, but I also know I have a huge way to go, and I'm really only just getting started. One of the things I look back on now and regret having not done was creating a kind of like documenting the journey from the beginning. I've maybe documented parts of it for myself, but I've never publicly talked about it because I was so busy doing it. But I think once you reach a certain point, you can start to take a bit of a step back and realize the importance of documenting it. Not just for me. I'd love to look back on this video series in 10 years and be like, that's where it all started again for me. But for the people who are perhaps where I was 4 or 5 years ago, and they're just getting started into the world of online business, online entrepreneurship, I can't wait to inspire them. Hopefully it helps them take some of that same leap that I did. And I just think it's going to be really exciting. So yeah, I can't wait to do it and document this journey and see what comes of it. Yeah, so one of the toughest moments in my entrepreneurial journey so far, I remember it really vividly as well, is I think these are the lessons that shift your identity. They shift your thinking when it comes to business. So my wife and I had decided, one day Becky came to me, my wife, and said, or at the time my fiance, and said, let's move our wedding forward, let's bring it forward so that later in the year we can leave our jobs and move to live in Thailand. Now, when she said this, I was like, whoever gets given that kind of a proposition, right? And I realized like this is the moment where it's make or break, and like for me, has it been all talk up to this stage, or am I going to put my money where my mouth is and actually do this? And I was like, who gets this opportunity to do something like this? So I thought, okay, well, it's make or break. Like I have to make it work now. So I had just launched my first e-commerce business, and it was using a model of dropshipping that we now actually teach in the Home Turf Advantage model that I have, my book for Home Turf Advantage, and our program, the Dropship Unlocked Masterclass. And it was the first time I'd done it. So I made some big mistakes when I first got started, didn't know how to run a business, didn't know how to manage cash flow, VAT, corp tax, all these things. And we moved to Thailand, we packed up our lives, we sold everything that we owned to like our friends. We had this funny auction at our house where we got all of our friends around, had a few drinks, and then like auctioned off the Hoover and the clock on the wall and all these things. Then we rented our flat that we had in London and just moved to Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. Neither of us had ever even been there before. We just moved there. And it's this like digital nomad hotspot hub in Thailand. And it was incredible. We didn't have any children at the time. We just got married, running an online business, and life was amazing. Like I loved it. It was so good. After a few months there, I hit some big problems where I realized I needed to pull a few £1,000s out of the company to pay myself for the next month to live. And I just realized like we owe the suppliers that we are working with more than we have currently in the bank account. And we have a tax bill coming up, and I can't get any money out of the company now. And it suddenly dawned on me, like because these cash flow problems can be quite masked and hidden when you're running a business where there's like lots of cash coming in, but you've also got quite high costs. And we'd spent a lot on ads. I hadn't allocated money aside for taxes because I didn't know this stuff, right? I'm not an accountant. And it got to the point where I realized, hang on a second, we are probably £20,000 in the hole here, £20,000 in debt. First time I've ever had that level of concern or worry or anxiety. And I remember that afternoon, like I told Becky about it, and I was like shaking because I think I tied my identity so closely to the business at that point. I felt like if I have to now admit failure and defeat, I'm going to have to go back to London with my tail between my legs and be like, yeah, I left this corporate world. I tried, I failed, can I have my job back, that kind of thing. And it kind of shook me to my core. And I remember at the time going for lunch after that revelation, that realization, and just being really shaken and really lost, not knowing what to do. I was like, do I just shut the whole thing down? I was Googling like how to declare bankruptcy, like insolvency practitioners. I didn't realize, knowing what I know now, I would have never gotten into that situation, but I'd also know 10 ways out of it. Now whatever, get some kind of like loan to see me through, to build up the cash flow, the reserves, take on some funding, whatever. But back then, that was a scary amount of money. That was, you know, probably like half of what I would have earned in a year or something in that previous job. So it was really difficult, really scary, and it was a tough moment. And I remember my wife's parents actually flew out, and my parents flew out to Thailand, and then we were in Bali a few weeks later. And we were supposedly in paradise. You know, you see all these like Instagrammers being like, hey man, 6-figure business, like working from a laptop on the beach. And we were there, and people were like, oh gosh, you guys have it so good. And I was like, at that moment, I thought, you have no idea. I would trade the level of anxiety and nerves and homesickness and worry and concern about my family's future for what you have right now, which is that stability. Even if it seems like, you know, you're back in the golden handcuffs in the corporate world, where I would have given anything to go back to having the company car and the nice, safe corporate pension and the nice, safe salary package that was every month consistent. And fortunately, I found my way out of that over time, and I spoke to my suppliers, and it showed the benefit of having created those good relationships up front, that they were understanding and they were happy to let us pay back that £20,000 over the coming months. And Becky started taking on some work as well. She was freelancing, and we actually lived off her freelancing salary for a while, both of us, which we probably couldn't have done had we not been in Thailand, where the cost of living was so low. So it just shows this whole thing. It's like, whether you believe in fate or not, you know, had we been in London and had a, whatever it was, £2,000 mortgage to pay every month, I don't think we could have made that work. So I think everything does happen for a reason. You just might not realize the reason until 5 years later, and you look back on it and think, wow, that was a rocky start to entrepreneurship. One of the best things to have come from that is not only that I managed to overcome it, and I've now got this real kind of a fixation and obsession with the numbers in my businesses and the cash flow and making sure I manage it correctly. But it's also just knowing that I can now help other people starting out in that position avoid those kinds of issues and make sure that they start their business as safely and securely as possible, minimize their risk, and never get themselves into that horrible position that I was going to say I wish I hadn't been in, but I think, you know, had I not been in it, perhaps it would have just come later in life and been even worse. So at least I got through it, right? That was the lesson. Yeah, at least it was warm while I was having insomnia and anxiety attacks. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast as well, because becoming a father has changed me more than I could have ever imagined. I was at a mastermind business event with some really high-level entrepreneurs the last few days. So I've come back from that. I'm like pumped up and inspired and hearing some amazing success stories. But I was chatting to some guys there who are younger than me and doing some big numbers in their business, like multiple high 7-figure per year turnover businesses. And they were saying to me, like, what's your advice about kids? Like, are you glad you had kids? And anyone who has children will know how much it does change your life, but also how much it lights a fire inside you, because suddenly you have a motivation that you never thought was possible before. Like, for example, when I'm now watching, a movie, or we watched a true crime documentary the other day, you know, and if something like horrible happens to, like the parents of a kid, and the kid is left, you know, without their parents, there's like a new level of emotion that's been unlocked in me since having kids, that I'm now, oh my God, like I can empathize with that child and that parent's relationship with that child. And you like feel it like you wouldn't have ever thought possible prior to that. It's a weird explanation, but it is real. And so in terms of why I wanted to start this podcast, I wanted to show what it's like behind the scenes of a business owner who's also a parent, who's running one of these businesses, the realistic kind of gritty behind the scenes stuff of like, I go 1 minute from like changing a nappy to reading Jack and the Beanstalk to the next minute in here in like the TV studio that Adam's created for us, filming content. But I don't want to hide it anymore. Like I want to make sure that I'm authentic and that this content's aligned with who I am as a person. You know, I can hear my kids coming down the stairs now, but I don't care, because it's real, right? This is authentic content, and that's the purpose of this. I want to show behind the scenes of who I am as a person and hopefully help someone else on that journey, but also document it for me so that in the future I can look back and be like, wow, that was me, starting out on that journey. So the other thing about kids which has changed for me recently, which I realized when I was at this mastermind event and the dinner, and I was talking about this, when Becky and my wife and I moved to Thailand, I had these aspirations of become a digital nomad, like be able to live on a beach or in some amazing villa in Bali and like run your business from a laptop and make six figures, and it would be, that's the life everyone dreams of. And we got to that point and it was amazing. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. It was incredible. And as a first step, if you're young and you don't have children, 100% I'd say go for it. But then there comes a point where you're like, okay, so what's next? You can't sit and do that forever. And for me, it was giving back. It was helping other people, reaching a new level of fulfillment. That's why I didn't just create more e-commerce businesses. I created an e-learning business to kind of document the journey that I'd been on and help other people achieve that too. But the interesting thing about having kids recently for me has been that actually that digital nomad lifestyle of like living, I took my family to Mexico for 6 weeks in January of this year. And while we were there, it was an incredible trip. We took our two boys who are 1 and 3 at the moment right there. And we went to Playa del Carmen, and my wife and I were able to go out and took them to the beach and, swimming in the pool every day. It was amazing, but it was also exhausting. And it was like I was thinking, this is hard, to run 2 7-figure businesses, to have 12 full-time team members, and to manage 2 children that just want to spend time with dad all the time and go swimming. It made me realize that actually the thing that I want to do is not so much the go and live in Thailand for 6 months at a time, but it's maybe like what my wife calls semigrations. So maybe it's like a 3-week holiday in an amazing 5-star resort where we can kind of tune off, get the basics of the company set up okay, but just have that freedom and flexibility to spend time with the kids. They just popped out the door there. You can hear the door shutting. My wife taking my toddler out to a soft play, and just be able to like be present with them. That's my goals, my purpose for this chapter of my life have changed. And so I wanted to document this transition through this video series as well, and be like, actually, yeah, the old me would have wanted to move to Thailand, move to Mexico, spend my whole time there, run the businesses from there. But now actually I think I think having children has shifted my motivation there, which is exciting for me. And I don't know where the future motivations will be, but I'm kind of learning and growing every day, and I want to document that journey. Yeah, like the event that I was at on like the last couple of days, it like going to those events where you get around people that are just way further down the path than where you are. I just think like it expands my thinking, and I would advise anybody who can pay to get in a room of other people that are further down the path of where they want to get to, i.e. in my case, running online businesses, whether that's e-commerce, education businesses. It's one of the best hacks to supercharge your growth as an entrepreneur. And I left that event so inspired, because not only do you pick up like golden nuggets of like different things that you can implement in your business, of which we've got loads of cool stuff that we're gonna do. I can't wait to talk to the whole team and like share everybody the different projects that they can work on to take us to the next level. But then there were a couple of talks there that just completely like shattered my limiting beliefs that I didn't even realize I had around where you can take a business like this to. And for me, like someone who effectively runs the kind of business, or maybe say 4 years ago, their business was where my business is today. So I can see that like, oh, that's the trajectory that I'm on. But I haven't met anyone in person and seen behind the, like under the hood of their business that had got to the level that they're talking about. And this is someone who's talking about selling their business in this space for $1 billion in, I think he said 5 years. And this isn't like, he's not head in the clouds dreaming, like he has a clear roadmap projection of where that's going. Now, for me, that's like incredible, and it made me think I'm thinking way too small with this. And also it made me even slightly scared of thinking that big, because I'm like, I don't know if I want to run $1 billion business. Like the responsibility, the pressure, the stress that comes with that, having hundreds of employees. But then I realized that maybe again, that's just another limiting belief. is that just something that I've decided and assumed about running $1 billion business that perhaps is false, but yet I'm basing my concern on and thinking I wouldn't want to do that because people that run those level of businesses must be miserable and sad and stressed constantly. I mean, sitting down with him at dinner, he seemed very happy, fulfilled, doing incredibly well, balancing it with running a family, and it made me think, wow, maybe that's what's possible. And sometimes it just takes one person to have that conversation that just unlocks something in your mind that you realize you were holding yourself back the whole time. It's a big question. The legacy that I'm looking to build with this. I mean, I don't know where this is going to go, right? This YouTube channel I've created so that I can talk about topics that are outside of e-commerce, outside of dropshipping. I can talk to entrepreneurs of mine that are in the fitness space, entrepreneurs, people who are in like my friend network that are stand-up comedians, people who are professional athletes. Like, there's so many cool, highly driven, aspiring people in and out of business that I think I'd love to share on this channel, and so many lessons. And of course there'll be business chat as well, but there'll also be chat about like life, balancing it with being a parent, how you realign your business to your goals, how you manage cash flow, I'm going to try and just share as much as I can and use this as a bit of a journal along the way, try and add as much value as I possibly can. Because I think ultimately the legacy that I'd like to look back on this series and feel like I left behind would be that I left entrepreneurs who watched it in a much better place than they were prior to discovering me in this channel. If I can do that and lead with that level of goodwill, it's weird because there's no direct ask in this video. There's no direct ask in this series. This is just me putting good stuff out there and seeing what comes back from it down the line. I have no idea where this is going to go or what's going to come of it, but I know from experience that when you do that, exciting things happen. So I want to bring you along on that journey. I want to make it public and allow people to come with me on that journey. And I hope if you're watching this and you think you have an interesting story and would like to have a chat, maybe get in touch. Maybe we can feature you on the show. Like, the idea of this is that it's ultimate flexibility. It's fully aligned with who I am as a person. You know, there's no pressure, there's no script. It's just authentic. And to me, that's what YouTube should be about. That's the good stuff, right? Where you really can connect with someone. So I'm going to try and be as unfiltered as possible, give you the full insight into what it's like behind the scenes running these businesses, running a family like this, what I enjoy doing, you know, whether that's like health, diet, working out, whether that's investing, whether it's books that I've read recently that I think there are great lessons from. I'm using this as like personal accountability and a bit of a journal really to share openly and publicly so that in the future we can look back on this and be like, wow, that's where it all began.
So yeah, I just thought of a good question when you were talking a minute ago. I think the audience really like this. Any like influential people, any like good books that push you along the journey, like anything that stands out?
There's so many. It's like, if I start reeling them off, I'm going to offend people who I've forgotten. Do you know what I mean? It's like one of those, it's difficult. I mean, there's so many good people, from Alex Hormozy to Stephen Bartlett to people like Warren Buffett, right? And Jack Bogle and some incredible like investors, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, like just so many great mentors of mine who both have mentored me in person, but also who I feel like I've received mentorship in print from, that I've been inspired by. Yeah, so many great entrepreneurs that I think a big part of this series will just be like maybe sharing an episode on a particular entrepreneur, what I've learned from them, what I've gleaned from them, the books that they've written, the video content that they've created, and really just try and share that and provide as much value as I can in terms of my interpretations of what they've learning and my application of what they've what I've got from them. So yeah, there's so many mentors. I probably need to think a bit more deeply around like that, and that's probably a whole episode in itself, right? I'm sure I do have vulnerabilities and limiting beliefs. It's difficult, isn't it, when you the definition of a limiting belief is that it's a belief. So I can't remember the quote, but it's like the most, because you believe them, you don't realize that they are limiting because you just take it as fact. I mean, the other day, the example I just gave was one that was highlighted perfectly for me, that I think my limiting belief is that I could only scale where I'm at now to maybe like 10, maybe 20 million pounds per year. But absolutely now seeing the path to several hundred millions of pounds per year with a business like this, beyond, like way beyond that, way beyond that. And I think originally that would have firstly seemed so out of reach that I would have thought there's no point even striving for it. So I think you have to like recalibrate and realign your goals as you're going and as you're growing. But also just my understanding of what it means to be the person responsible for a business like that, and how actually that doesn't equate to stress and unfulfillment and sadness and those types of things. Like I've now witnessed the opposite to that. And so when those facts appear and you open your eyes to those things, you realize, oh wow, it's just me really getting in my own way. So yeah, I'm going to try and share as many vulnerabilities as I have on this as possible. I find it very difficult now, just thinking one off the top of my head. I used to have at least an hour commute in the drive, right, to come home from work. So I'd finish maybe in a hospital, training some doctors, nurses on our medical devices that we used to talk about and kind of demonstrate and educate them on. I'd go from there, drive home in rush hour traffic, get back, see my wife, and in that car journey, I'd like decompress and detach from work. Now, I come out of the office, if I've just been like hosting a Q&A call in there with our clients or been on a Zoom call or a podcast, I open the door and it's like I've gone from CEO to dad mode in 4 seconds. And to do that is really difficult. And I think sometimes I turn up to my family, giving them the leftovers of what remains from like the drained version of me on the podcast or whatever I've been filming, if I've been filming a new module for our training program, or if I've been like deep in an e-commerce development project for the morning. So it's just making sure that I show up in all areas of my life at 100% and I don't, burn out with work and not leave enough for my family, but it's just having that disconnection. So yeah, absolutely, there's that. There's many others. I'm sure there's many others that will come out and we can explore those in some episodes. If you've got comments or questions or anything like that, then please leave them in the comments or let us know. Ask a question depending on which platform you're watching this or listening to us on. What I hope to achieve from this podcast myself, at the moment, I don't even know. And that's the nice thing about it. That's the thing that for me allows me, it feels quite liberating. I'm not going into this. It's not like a video that's focused on conversions or a video that's got like a hard call to action and it's like, do this, do that. I'm just doing it because I know that if you put good stuff out there, it kind of good stuff also gravitates towards you. And I can't wait to see who I meet through this journey, which entrepreneurs I can interview throughout this podcast series. What opportunities come from it. So I guess in that sense, yeah, it is quite selfish, but not in a direct sense, if that makes sense. Like I know that this will be a good thing to do long term because I'll be able to look back on it in years to come and be like, I'm so glad I started that when I did, because I know I regret not having done it earlier. So I guess now is your chance. If you're watching this now, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review on this podcast, subscribe to the podcast, depending on where you're listening to it. If it's on YouTube, subscribe, or Spotify, subscribe, because you are getting in at the ground floor right now, and we're going to keep doing this consistently, as I've proven in the other businesses that I run. When I set my heart on something, I go after it and I do it. So like, come with me on the journey if you want to, and I'd love to share that path with you. I would have loved to be able to afford to be in the room with the kind of people I was in the room with the last 2 days at this event. And so if I can now help kind of digest the information that was in that room and then just pass it on to listeners through this, I think that's going to add so much value. So yeah, I'm excited about that. That's what people will get out of it. I hope that if you're listening to this, eventually maybe we can create some kind of network together where we can actually like meet in person. I want to connect with other business owners, whether you're established in business already, whether you're running an e-commerce business, an e-learning business, whether you have any similarities or parallels to me, or if you run a software business, or if you're looking to start a print-on-demand business, or whatever it is you do, and you're doing it for the same kind of reasons and values as me, which is to create a better future for yourself, your family, and to ultimately give back, I'd love to speak with you. I'd love to invite you into our network. I'd love to maybe even feature your story on the podcast. I want to sit down, have conversations with really inspiring entrepreneurs. And I'm excited. This is the start of the journey. It's going to be big. If the future me was watching this, I don't know what message I would have for the future me, but I guess if it was me watching this in 10 years' time, I'd be like, just know, all right, here I am in 10 years' time, future me, just know I was trying as hard as I could at this point. I was doing everything I possibly could. I'm going into this with the right reasons. I want to add value as much as possible, and I'm excited to see where I end up in 10 years' time. I thought I had big goals. Perhaps I wasn't thinking big enough. I'm going to do my best to try and document the journey to get from where I am now to where you are now. And hopefully anyone watching this can come along with me on the journey.